My name is Patricia, a 28-year-old freelance graphic designer trying to build my career in Boston. What should have been a happy birthday celebration at an upscale restaurant turned into a nightmare when my grandpa Thomas smiled and casually asked, "I hope you are enjoying the apartment I bought you." I froze, whispering back, "Grandpa, I live in a basement apartment." The clatter of my dad dropping his fork echoed through the sudden silence. Every eye at the table turned to us as the blood drained from my father's face. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you. Life before my 28th birthday had been a constant hustle. As a freelance graphic designer in Boston, I was barely making ends meet. My home was a converted basement apartment in Somerville with persistent mold issues and unreliable heating. Every month was a financial tightrope walk between paying rent, buying groceries, and keeping my ancient laptop functioning for client work. Despite having a degree from a respected art school, consistent high-paying gigs were still elusive. My family situation was complicated. My parents divorced when I was 15, a messy separation that divided not just assets, but family loyalties. My father, Richard, quickly remarried Vanessa, a real estate agent, with expensive tastes and strong opinions. They lived in a beautiful colonial house in Cambridge with my half-brother Ethan, now 16. Dad had built a successful investment firm and lived the life he always wanted me to pursue, a stable, lucrative career path like him. Art is a hobby, Patricia, not a career, he would say. During our increasingly infrequent phone calls, there is always a marketing position at my firm. If you get tired of this struggling artist phase, my mother, Eleanor, moved to California shortly after the divorce to find herself and ended up finding a new husband and career in event planning. Our relationship consisted mainly of birthday calls and occasional text messages. Checking in, she was too busy with her new life to worry much about her adult daughter across the country. Then there was my older sister, Stephanie, the golden child. At 31, she was already a junior partner at a prestigious law firm, married to a surgeon, and living in a beautiful brownstone in Beacon Hill. My father never missed an opportunity to mention her accomplishments or suggest I follow her example. Every family gathering became an exercise in comparison that left me feeling inadequate. "Stephanie just closed another major case," Dad would announce. "The partners are very impressed with her work ethic." The subtle implication was always clear. Why couldn't I be more like her? The only person who truly supported my artistic ambitions was my grandfather, Thomas, a retired architect with an appreciation for Creative City. He had always been my greatest champion. When I was a child, he would sit with me for hours, teaching me to draw and telling stories about famous artists throughout history. He came to every art show, from elementary school hallway exhibitions to my college thesis presentation. "You have a gift, Patricia," he would tell me, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "Never let anyone convince you to bury it." Even as an adult, Grandpa Thomas remained my strongest ally. He understood my desire to make it on my own terms without financial help from family. When I graduated college and everyone else questioned my decision to freelance instead of taking a corporate job, he sent me a card that simply read, "I believe in you. Always will." Despite my financial struggles, I had stubbornly refused assistance from my family. Part of it was pride. After years of having my career choice criticized, I wanted to prove I could succeed on my own terms. But it was also about establishing independence. My father had used financial support as a means of control for too long. I would rather eat ramen noodles in a basement apartment than accept help with conditions attached. In the weeks leading up to my birthday, I had actually started to feel optimistic. I had landed a few promising new clients, including a local brewery that needed label designs. My portfolio was growing, and for the first time, I could envision a path toward financial stability, doing what I loved. When my father called to invite me to a birthday dinner at Aquitaine, one of Boston's most expensive French restaurants, I was surprised but hopeful. Maybe this was an olive branch, a sign he was finally ready to accept my choices. I spent hours getting ready, selecting a simple black dress that wouldn't look too out of place among my family's designer clothes, and applying makeup to hide the exhaustion from staying up late finishing client work. This could be a fresh start, I told myself as I locked the door to my basement apartment. Maybe we can finally move past the disappointment and judgment. How wrong I was. The birthday dinner would not mark a new beginning with my family, but would instead expose years of lies and betrayal that would shake the very foundation of our relationships. Aquitaine was exactly the kind of restaurant my father would choose, premium polished and pretentious. The soft lighting, white tablecloths, and waiters in crisp uniforms created an atmosphere that made my simple black dress feel woefully inadequate. I arrived 15 minutes early, nervous energy propelling me through Boston's chilly spring evening. The maitre d' led me to a corner table where my father and Vanessa were already seated. Dad stood to give me a stiff hug, while Vanessa offered her usual air kiss near my cheek, careful not to smudge her perfect makeup. "Happy birthday, Patricia," my father said, resuming his seat. "You look nice." The slight pause spoke volumes in Vanessa's world of designer labels and seasonal wardrobes. Nice was barely a compliment. "Thanks, Dad. This place is beautiful." "Well, 28 is a significant birthday," Vanessa interjected, smoothing her silk blouse, though Stephanie had already made junior partner by your age. And there it was, less than 2 minutes into dinner. I took a deep breath and reached for my water glass. Stephanie arrived next with her husband James in tow. She looked immaculate in a navy blue dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. After exchanging pleasantries and birthday wishes, she launched into a detailed account of her latest courtroom victory. The opposing counsel was completely unprepared, she explained, gesturing with her perfectly manicured hands. The judge practically handed us the ruling. My father beamed with pride. That is the advantage of thorough preparation and hard work. I fought the urge to point out that I worked just as hard at my design projects, often pulling all-nighters to meet deadlines. But I knew it would only lead to the usual dismissive comments about my little drawings. Ethan arrived next, looking uncomfortable in a blazer that was slightly too small for his rapidly growing teenage frame. As the baby of the family, he was the one person who seemed genuinely happy to see me. He slipped into the chair beside me. "Happy birthday, Trish," he whispered, using the nickname. Only he was allowed to use. "I made you something, but I will give it to you later. It is kind of lame compared to what everyone else probably got you." I squeezed his hand under the table. "I am sure I will love it." The waiter had just finished taking our drink orders when Grandpa Thomas made his entrance. At 82, he still cut an impressive figure tall, with a full head of silver hair and alert blue eyes that missed nothing. He walked with a slight limp from hip replacement surgery the previous year, but refused to use a cane. "There is the birthday girl," he announced, making his way to my chair. I stood to embrace him, and the familiar scent of his cologne instantly brought back childhood memories. For the first time that evening, my smile was genuine. "I thought you might not make it," I said. He winked at me and missed my favorite granddaughter's birthday. "Never. She is one of only 2 granddaughters." "Dad," my father pointed out with a tight smile. "And yet the statement stands." Grandpa replied smoothly, taking the empty seat across from me. The arrival of my grandfather shifted the dynamic at the table. He had a way of commanding attention without effort, and even my father seemed to straighten his posture slightly in his presence. Conversation flowed more easily with Grandpa Thomas, asking Ethan about school, and James about his latest medical research. After we ordered our meals, Grandpa Thomas produced a small, carefully wrapped package from his jacket pocket. "I believe it is tradition to give gifts on birthdays," he said, sliding it across the table to me. Inside was a framed sketch yellowed with age. I recognized it immediately. It was a drawing I had made when I was around 7 years old. A crude but enthusiastic portrait of Grandpa and me holding hands in front of what I had intended to be the Boston skyline. "You kept this?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Of course, your first commissioned work." His eyes twinkled. "You charged me a whole $1 for it, if I recall correctly." A shrewd negotiator even then, everyone at the table laughed. And for a moment, the evening felt almost normal. We enjoyed our appetizers as Ethan regaled us with stories from his science class, and I found myself relaxing slightly. Maybe this birthday dinner would turn out okay, after all the main courses had just been served. When Grandpa Thomas leaned forward and ask the question that would shatter the evening's fragile peace. "So, Patricia, how are you enjoying the apartment? I drove by the building last week. Beacon Street is such a lovely area, especially with the cherry trees blooming now." I paused, fork suspended halfway to my mouth. "What apartment on Beacon Street?" Grandpa Thomas looked confused. "The apartment I purchased for you, of course. The one bedroom in that beautiful brownstone near the public garden. I know you wanted to make it on your own, but I thought having a nice home base would help you focus on building your business." The clatter of my father's fork hitting his plate was almost comically loud in the sudden silence that descended over our table. I looked from my grandfather's perplexed expression to my father's rapidly paling face. "Grandpa," I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper, "I live in a basement apartment in Somerville. I have never lived on Beacon Street." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Stephanie stared intently at her plate, while Vanessa suddenly became very interested in adjusting her bracelet. Only Ethan looked as confused as I felt. "That is impossible," Grandpa Thomas said firmly. "I gave your father $750,000 6 months ago to purchase you an apartment as an early birthday gift. The paperwork was all arranged through him since I was recovering from my surgery." All eyes turned to my father, whose face had now transitioned from pale to a muddled red. He cleared his throat and reached for his wine glass, taking a long, deliberate sip before speaking. "Thomas, this is hardly the time or place to discuss financial matters. We can talk about this privately later." "No," I said, my voice stronger now. "I think now is exactly the right time. What apartment, Dad? What is Grandpa talking about?" The waiter chose that unfortunate moment to approach our table, asking if everything was satisfactory with our meals. The chorus of tight forced smiles and murmured affirmations must have looked bizarre, but he retreated quickly, sensing the tension as soon as he was out of earshot. Grandpa Thomas spoke again, his voice lower but intense. "Richard, what have you done with the money I entrusted to you?" My father's response was cut off by Vanessa's shrill, artificial laugh. "This is all just a big misunderstanding," she said, placing her hand on my grandfather's arm. "Let us enjoy Patricia's birthday dinner, and you men can sort out the details tomorrow." But I could see from the rigid set of my grandfather's shoulders and the way my father avoided meeting anyone's eyes that this was no misunderstanding. Something was very wrong, and the sinking feeling in my stomach told me my family's carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. The remainder of dinner passed in excruciating slow motion. We ate in near silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware against fine china and the murmur of conversations from nearby tables. The waiter, sensing the tension, removed our barely touched plates without comment and declined to offer the dessert menu. "I think we should continue this discussion at our house," my father finally said, signaling for the check. "This is a private family matter. No one disagrees." 20 minutes later, our awkward procession of cars pulled into my father and Vanessa's driveway. The colonial-style house loomed large and imposing against the darkening sky, its perfectly maintained exterior a testament to my stepmother's attention to appearances. We gathered in the formal living room, a space rarely used except for entertaining guests. I perched on the edge of an uncomfortable antique chair, while Grandpa Thomas remained standing, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. "Richard," he said once everyone was settled, "I want an explanation, and I want it now. Where is the apartment I purchased for Patricia?" My father loosened his tie slightly, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. "Dad, you need to understand that these decisions are complex. I was acting in Patricia's best interest." "That doesn't answer my question." Grandpa's voice was steel. "I transferred $750,000 to your account specifically for the purchase of an apartment for Patricia. I have the bank records and the letter of intent we both signed. Maybe there was a miscommunication," Vanessa interjected smoothly. "Richard handles so many financial transactions. Perhaps the funds were temporarily allocated elsewhere while waiting for the right property." "There was no miscommunication," Grandpa Thomas responded, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I have copies of everything right here." I watched stunned as he removed several documents and placed them on the coffee table. Among them was a letter written on my father's business stationery, acknowledging receipt of the funds and their intended purpose. "Dad, is this true?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did Grandpa give you money to buy me an apartment 6 months ago?" My father stood abruptly and walked to the bar cart in the corner of the room. He poured himself a generous glass of scotch before turning to face us. "Yes," he finally admitted. "The money was transferred to me." "Then where is my apartment?" I demanded, anger beginning to replace shock. "And why am I living in a moldy basement while you have known for months that I had other options?" "You weren't ready," he said, taking a large swallow of his drink. "You are still trying to make this graphic design hobby work. I couldn't in good conscience set you up in a luxury apartment when you haven't shown the responsible city or maturity to maintain it." The condescension in his voice was like a slap. "So you just kept the money, used it for yourself?" "I invested it," he said defensively. "I'm a financial advisor, Patricia. That is what I do. The money isn't gone. It has just been put to better use until you are in a more stable position." "Richard," Grandpa Thomas cut in, "that money was not yours to invest. It was a gift to your daughter with very specific intentions that you acknowledged in writing." "Dad, please." Stephanie spoke for the first time since we had arrived at the house. "I am sure Dad was just trying to protect the investment until Patricia was more established." "Stay out of this, Stephanie," I snapped. Then paused as a thought occurred to me. "Wait, did you know about this?" The way she averted her eyes told me everything. I knew Grandpa had given Dad money for you, but I thought you knew too, and had worked something out with Dad." "Worked something out?" I repeated incredulously. "Why would I choose to live in a basement with black mold if I knew I had an apartment?" "Because you are always so insistent about making it on your own," she replied. "You reject every offer of help. I thought maybe you were being stubborn about accepting Grandpa's gift." I shook my head in disbelief. My sister, who I had always envied for her success and stability, had known about my inheritance and said nothing while I struggled. "So where exactly is this money now?" Grandpa Thomas demanded. "I want specifics, Richard." My father shifted uncomfortably. "It has been allocated across several investment vehicles. Which ones Grandpa pressed?" "This is getting ridiculous," Vanessa interrupted. "Richard is a certified financial advisor with 25 years of experience. He made a judgment call that the money would be better protected in investments than tied up in real estate for someone who can barely keep a consistent income." Her words stung, but they also fueled my growing anger. This isn't about my income or my career choices. This is about Dad taking money that was meant for me and using it however he wanted. It was not just for any investments, my father finally admitted, staring into his now empty glass. The majority was used to help expand Stephanie's husband's medical practice. They're opening a new clinic, and the return on investment will be substantial. The room fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Not only had my father diverted my gift to an investment, but he had chosen to invest it in a way that primarily benefited my sister's family. "You used my apartment money to fund James and Stephanie's clinic." I asked, my voice hollow, while knowing I was living in a basement and struggling to pay rent. "It wasn't like that," Stephanie protested weakly. "The clinic will benefit many people, and the investment will grow. It is a sound financial decision." "That wasn't your decision to make," I shouted, jumping to my feet. "Neither of you had the right to decide what happens with a gift that was meant for me." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "This is exactly why Richard made the right call. Look at how emotionally you are reacting. This is why you are not ready for that kind of financial responsibility." I turned to her, fury building. "Did you know too? Was everyone in this family aware that I had an apartment fund, except me?" Her hesitation was brief but telling. "I was aware that Thomas had made a generous gift, and I supported Richard's decision to protect it. Until you demonstrated more maturity, protect it by giving it to Stephanie instead." I laughed bitterly. "That is rich, Vanessa. Really rich." "The money went to a solid investment opportunity," my father insisted. "One that will ultimately benefit the whole family." "How exactly does it benefit me?" I demanded, while I am breathing in mold every night and skipping meals to make rent. "You are being dramatic," Stephanie said dismissively. "If things were really that bad, you could have asked for help." "I shouldn't have had to ask," I shouted. "Grandpa already helped me. Dad just decided I didn't deserve it." Ethan, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly spoke up. "Is that why you told me not to mention the apartment when I talked to Patricia?" He asked my father, his young face troubled. "You said it was a surprise for later. But that was months ago. The betrayal cut even deeper. Even my teenage brother had been instructed to keep secrets from me. Grandpa Thomas placed a steadying hand on my shoulder before turning to face my father. "Richard, I am deeply disappointed in you. This is not just about the money. This is about trust and respect. You betrayed both where your daughter is concerned." My father's face hardened. "You have always favored Patricia, even when her choices make no sense. Art is not a sustainable career path. I was trying to protect her from herself. By lying to her, by giving her inheritance to her sister." Grandpa shot back. "That is not protection, Richard. That is control." As the argument escalated between my father and grandfather, a horrible realization began to dawn on me. If my father had been willing to divert this gift, what else might he have manipulated throughout my life, Dad? I said, cutting through their heated exchange. "The scholarship I received for art school. Was that really a scholarship? Or did Grandpa pay for that too?" The flash of guilt across both men's faces confirmed my suspicion. Before either could speak, it was a private scholarship. My grandfather finally admitted. "I established it through the Alumni Foundation. But yes, I funded it specifically for you, and my first internship at the design agency. I asked already knowing the answer, the one I thought I earned based on my portfolio." Grandpa Thomas looked away. "I knew the creative director. I asked him to give your work special consideration. But you earned the position with your talent, Patricia." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. Achievements. I had been proud of moments when I thought I had proven my worth on merit. Alone, suddenly felt hollow and contrite. The realization that I had been unknowingly dependent on my grandfather's intervention was almost as painful as learning about my father's betrayal. "So I never actually earned anything on my own," I whispered. "It was all just arranged for me." "That is not true," Grandpa Thomas insisted. "I only opened doors. You walked through them on your own merit." But the damage was done in trying to protect me from my father's manipulations. My grandfather had created his own, leaving me questioning every accomplishment in my professional life. "I cannot believe this," I said, looking around at the faces of my family members. "Every single one of you has lied to me or kept secrets from me for years." "We were trying to help you," Stephanie said, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice now. "No," I replied coldly. "You were helping yourselves feel superior. Poor Patricia, the struggling artist who needs everyone's help but doesn't know. It must have been fun watching me fight for every dollar, while you all knew I had $750,000 sitting in Dad's account. It wasn't like that." My father protested. "We just wanted what was best for you, what was best for me." I repeated, my voice rising. "How would you know what is best for me when you have never once actually listened to what I want?" The room fell silent in that moment, looking at the faces of my family. I realized that I had spent years trying to earn approval from people who would never truly see me for who I was. They saw only the version of me they wanted to see, the wayward daughter who needed guidance, the foolish artist who would eventually come to her senses. "I am done," I said quietly. "I am done trying to make you proud. I am done seeking your approval, and I am done with all of you." With those words, I grabbed my purse and walked out, ignoring the calls of my name behind me. As I stepped into the cool night air, tears finally began to fall, but underneath the hurt was something unexpected. A sense of liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my family clearly, without the distortion of hope or obligation. And now I had to figure out what to do next. I had only made it halfway down the driveway when I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw Ethan jogging to catch up, his lanky teenage frame. Awkward in the too small blazer. "Patricia, wait," he called. "You forgot this." He held out the small gift bag he had brought to the restaurant. "I still want you to have it." I took the bag, touched by his gesture. Despite everything, inside was a handmade bracelet of braided embroidery threads in shades of blue and green. "I made it an art club," he explained, looking embarrassed. "I know it is not as fancy as what everyone else gives you, but I picked the colors because they remind me of that painting you did for my room." Fresh tears threatened as I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist. "It is perfect, Ethan. Thank you." He shuffled his feet. "Are you really done with all of us? Even me?" The question pierced through my anger. No, not with you. Never with you. What about Grandpa Thomas? He seemed just as surprised as you. Before I could respond, the front door opened again. My father emerged, followed closely by my grandfather. There he did. Voices carrying across the manicured lawn. You had no right to bring this up. At her birthday dinner, my father was saying, we could have handled this privately. Like you have been handling it for the past 6 months, Grandpa shot back. How much longer would you have kept this from her if I hadn't mentioned it tonight? My grandfather caught sight of me standing with Ethan and changed direction, heading toward us with determined strides. Despite his limp, my father followed his face a storm cloud. Patricia, Grandpa Thomas called. Please don't leave like this. We need to fix this situation. Fix it! How I asked bitterly as they reached us. The money is gone, invested in Stephanie's husband's clinic, and frankly, that is not even what hurts the most. The money is not gone, my father insisted. It is invested. There is a difference. Stop saying that I snapped. Just stop pretending. This was about financial management. This was about you deciding once again that you know better than me what I need. Because I do know better. He exploded his composure, finally cracking. Look at your life, Patricia. 28 years old. And what do you have to show for it? A few drawings for local businesses, a moldy basement apartment, while your sister has a real career, a husband, a home. The truth of how he saw me, laid bare at last, hit like a physical blow. I stepped back, bumping into Ethan, who steadied me with a hand on my shoulder. Dad, that is not fair, he protested, surprising all of us with his intervention. Stay out of this, Ethan, my father warned. No, my brother replied, his voice cracking slightly. Patricia is the only one who ever really listens to me. The only one who cares about what I want instead of what you and Mom want for me. The front door opened again, and now Stephanie and Vanessa joined our lawn confrontation, creating a bizarre family tableau for any neighbors who might be watching. Richard, bring this inside immediately, Vanessa hissed. The Hamiltons across the street are watching. I don't care who is watching. I said I want answers. I want to know why my entire family conspired to keep this from me. I didn't conspire to do anything, Stephanie protested. I only found out about the apartment fund a few months ago when Dad approached James about the clinic investment. And you didn't think to mention it to me? Your own sister. She at least had the decency to look ashamed. Dad said he was handling it, that he was waiting for the right time. The right time, I laughed incredulously. When would that have been, Stephanie? When I was successful enough by his standards. When I gave up on art and got a real job. Don't put this on your sister, my father cut in. This was my decision, a decision you had no right to make. Grandpa Thomas said firmly that money was a gift to Patricia, not a fund for you to manage or distribute as you saw fit. Of course it was your decision, I said to my father, ignoring my grandfather for the moment. It is always your decision. You have been trying to control my life since I was a child. I have been trying to guide you to help you avoid mistakes, by lying to me, by stealing from me. I did not steal from you, he roared. I was protecting you from yourself, from this ridicule, this fantasy that you can make a living drawing pictures. Richard, Grandpa Thomas's voice cut through the night air. That is enough. But it wasn't enough. Now that the dam had broken, years of resentment and hurt came flooding out. You have never respected me, I said, my voice shaking. Not my choices, not my dreams, not my work. Nothing I do will ever be good enough for you because it is not what you would choose. That is not true, my father insisted, but his eyes shifted away from mine. It is true, Stephanie interjects quietly. Dad, you have always been harder on Patricia, always questioned her choices more than mine. I turned to my sister in surprise. This was the first time she had ever acknowledged the different standards our father held us to. Stay out of this, Stephanie Vanessa warned. No, Stephanie continued, something new in her voice. I have stayed out of it for too long. The truth is, Dad, you pushed me toward law because it was what you respected. You never once asked if it was what I wanted. And is it not, my father challenged, you are successful, respected partner track. At 31. And miserable, Stephanie said softly. I have panic attacks in the bathroom between meetings. I cry in my car during lunch breaks. I hate what I do, Dad. This confession stunned me as much as the revelation about the apartment. My perfect, successful sister, the one I had envied for years, was miserable. You never said anything, I whispered. How could I? She replied, looking at me directly. You were the brave one, Patricia. You followed your passion, despite everyone telling you not to. I took the easy path, the one with guaranteed approval. And I hate myself for it. This is ridiculous, Vanessa interjected. Stephanie, you are just stressed from work. You don't mean these things. I do mean them, my sister insisted. I have meant them for years, and watching Dad take Patricia's gift and use it for my benefit instead, it is just one more way. He's always favored what I represent over who Patricia actually is. My father looked genuinely shocked. Stephanie, I had no idea you felt this way about your career because you never asked. She replied simply, just like you never asked Patricia if she wanted or needed your protection from her own choices. Grandpa Thomas cleared his throat. I think we have established that there have been serious communication issues in this family. But right now, the immediate concern is rectifying the financial situation. I agree, I said, finding my voice again. Dad, I want the money Grandpa gave you for my apartment. All of it. It is not that simple, my father replied, but with less conviction than before. The funds are invested in the clinic project. There are contracts commitments. Then break them, Grandpa Thomas said firmly. Or I will have my lawyers look into charges of financial misappropriation. You would not dare. My father breathed, face paling. Try me. My grandfather replied, his voice steel. I may be 82, but I am still perfectly capable of taking legal action when necessary. Ethan, who had been quietly observing this entire exchange, suddenly spoke again. Is this why you and Mom have been fighting so much lately? About Patricia's money? All eyes turned to my brother, then to my father and Vanessa. The tension between them, which I had attributed to their usual dynamic, suddenly took on new meaning. Ethan, go inside, Vanessa said sharply. No, I countered. Let him speak. What do you mean, Ethan? How have they been fighting? My brother looked uncertain but continued. I heard them arguing last week. Mom said the clinic investment was too risky and that Grandpa would find out eventually. Dad said it was too late to back out. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. This is completely inappropriate. Ethan should not be involved in adult discussions. Why, I asked. So you can keep lying to him to keep him in the dark about how this family really operates. Patricia. My father said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. Now you have to understand. Everything I have done has been out of love. I wanted to protect you from financial mistakes while you are still establishing yourself. No, I said firmly. What you wanted was control. You took my choices away from me because you don't respect me enough to let me make my own decisions, even when they're different from what you would choose. I turned to face my grandfather. And you? You meant well, but you have been manipulating my life from behind the scenes for years. My scholarship, my internship, now, this apartment. Did you ever stop to think that maybe I needed to make my own way, succeed or fail on my own terms? Grandpa Thomas looked genuinely pained. I only wanted to help, to give you opportunities. But they weren't really opportunities if they were arranged, were they? They were just illusions that made me think I had earned something on merit, when really it was just my grandfather pulling strings. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Every member of my family had in their own way contributed to a web of lies and manipulations that had shaped my life without my knowledge or consent. I hate you, I whispered, looking at each of them in turn. I hate all of you right now. You don't mean that, my father said automatically. I do. I insisted, tears streaming freely. Now. Maybe not forever, but right now in this moment. I hate what you have done. I hate the lies. I hate that none of you ever truly saw me with those words. I turned and walked away, ignoring their calls. This time, no one followed. I made it to the street and began walking, not caring where I was going, just needing to put distance between myself and the family that had betrayed me in so many ways. As the cool night air dried the tears on my face, one thought crystallized through the pain and confusion. For the first time in my life, I was seeing my family clearly, and now I needed to figure out who I was without their influence and who I wanted to become. I spent the cab ride back to my basement apartment in a daze, the events of the evening replaying in my mind like scenes from someone else's life. How could my entire family have kept such a massive secret from me? The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. When I finally trudged down to the concrete steps to my basement unit, the place I had called home for the past 2 years looked different somehow. The water stain on the ceiling, the perpetually damp corner by the bathroom, the drafty windows I had weatherproofed with plastic sheets and duct tape. All of it seemed more insulting. Now knowing I could have been living in a Beacon Street apartment all this time, I collapsed onto my futon sofa and pulled out my phone. 12 missed calls, 5 from Grandpa Thomas, 3 from my father, 2 from Stephanie, 1 from Ethan, and surprisingly, 1 from my mother in California. News traveled fast. I silenced the phone and tossed it aside. I couldn't talk to any of them right now, not when the wound was still so raw. For the next week, I functioned on autopilot. I turned in client work, responded to emails. 8, when I remembered 2. But inside I felt hollow. Each day the calls and texts continued growing increasingly concerned. I responded only to Ethan, assuring him I was okay, and that my anger wasn't directed at him. Grandpa Thomas left voicemails daily. "Patricia, please call me. We need to sort this out. The money is yours." It always was. I've spoken with my lawyers about recovering it from your father. My father's messages alternated between defensive and contrite. "You're overreacting." "Patricia, I was only trying to protect your interests," followed days later by, "I may have made a mistake. Can we talk about this like adults?" Stephanie's texts surprised me the most. "I've been thinking about what you said about following your passion. You were right. I should have been braver. But I wasn't ready to forgive any of them. Every time I considered responding, I remembered the look on my father's face when he defended giving my apartment money to Stephanie's husband. I remembered the years of struggling to make ends meet, while believing I was building my career on talent alone, only to discover my grandfather had been pulling strings behind the scenes. 2 weeks after the birthday dinner disaster, a knock at my door startled me from a design project I was struggling to focus on. I opened it to find a young woman about my age with curly red hair and a friendly smile. "Hi, I'm Hannah, your new neighbor from upstairs," she said, holding out a plate of cookies. "I just moved in last week and thought I'd introduce myself." Her cheerfulness was so at odds with my mood that I almost closed the door, but basic politeness prevailed. "Patricia," I said, accepting the cookies. "Nice to meet you. I hope this isn't weird," she continued. "But I noticed you haven't left your apartment much since I moved in. Everything okay?" Under normal circumstances, I would have given a polite brush off, but something about Hannah's direct approach broke through my isolation family drama. I heard myself saying, "Pretty major family drama, actually." Hannah nodded sympathetically. "Been there. My mom didn't speak to me for a year when I dropped out of med school to become a pastry chef. Want to talk about it over coffee? These cookies pair really well with caffeine." That afternoon, sitting in Hannah's much nicer ground floor apartment, I found myself telling a complete stranger the entire sordid story. Hannah listened without interruption, occasionally pushing the plate of cookies closer when my voice cracked with emotion. "That's seriously messed up," she said, when I finally finished all of it. "Your dad's stealing your apartment money, your grandfather's secret pulling of strings, your sister's complicity. No wonder you're holed up in your apartment. I don't even know what to do next." I admitted I've been ignoring everyone except my brother. Hannah considered this. "Can I offer an outside perspective from someone with zero stake in your family dynamics?" I nodded, grateful for an objective viewpoint. "It sounds like everyone in your family was trying to help you in their own twisted way," she began. "Your dad genuinely thinks he knows what's best, even though his methods are controlling and underhanded. Your grandfather wanted to support you, but didn't trust you enough to be direct about it. Your sister was caught in the middle and chose the path of least resistance. That doesn't excuse what they did," I protested. "Absolutely not." Hannah agreed. What they did was wrong, full stop. But understanding their motivations might help you decide what to do next, which relationships are worth salvaging, and which boundaries need to be established. Over the next few weeks, Hannah became my unexpected lifeline. She dragged me out of my apartment for walks along the Charles River, brought me leftovers from the bakery where she worked, and never pressured me to reconnect with my family before I was ready through Hannah. I also met a group of local artists who gathered weekly in a repurposed warehouse space to work on projects and share feedback. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who understood my passion, who spoke my language of color and composition, who valued my work for what it was rather than measuring it against traditional metrics of success. "Your use of negative space is really distinctive," commented Leah, a muralist, examining my portfolio one evening. "Have you ever worked large scale? Your style would translate beautifully to murals." I hadn't considered it before, but the seed was planted when the owner of the coffee shop where Hannah worked mentioned wanting to freshen up their back wall. I volunteered a design concept. To my surprise, he loved it and offered to pay me for the work. Not a fortune, but a fair rate for my time and materials, as I spent a week transforming the blank wall into a vibrant scene of coffee plants and harvesting. Something shifted inside me. This was my work earned entirely on merit, with no family connections or secret assistance. The satisfaction I felt was pure and untainted by doubt. Meanwhile, the calls and messages from my family continued, though, with decreasing frequency as the weeks passed. I still wasn't ready to engage, but I found myself listening to the voicemails more often, trying to hear the truth behind the words. 2 months after my birthday dinner, an email from Ethan broke through my self-imposed isolation. "Patricia, I miss you. Things are really bad at home. Dad and Vanessa are fighting all the time. Stephanie barely visits anymore. Grandpa Thomas is talking about taking Dad to court, and the clinic investment is failing. I overheard Dad on the phone saying they're going to lose everything. I know you're still mad, and you have every right to be, but I feel like our whole family is falling apart. Can we talk? Just you and me?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying with a simple, "I miss you too, Ethan. Let's meet this weekend over burgers at his favorite diner." Ethan filled me in on the family implosion. My father's investment in James's clinic had turned disastrous when their main financial backer pulled out, leaving them overextended. Grandpa Thomas had indeed consulted lawyers about recovering the misappropriated funds, which had led to heated arguments between him and my father. "Stephanie and James are fighting too," Ethan reported, picking at his fries. "She told him she never wanted the fancy house or the clinic expansion. She said she's tired of living the life Dad wants for her instead of what she wants." "And what about you?" I asked gently. "How are you holding up in all this?" He shrugged, suddenly looking much younger than his 16 years. "It sucks. I hate being home now. Dad's always stressed. Vanessa's always angry. I spend most of my time at friends' houses. I'm sorry." "Ethan, I never wanted any of this to affect you." "It's not your fault," he said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just wanted the truth. Nobody's mad at you, Patricia. They're mad at themselves." As I drove Ethan home that evening, I realized that while I wasn't ready to forgive, I was at least ready to listen. The time had come to face my family again, not for their sake, but for my own. I needed closure to truly move forward. The question was where to begin. The Boston Public Garden was bursting with spring colors when I met Grandpa Thomas there. The following week, he looked older. Somehow, the events of the past months etched into the lines of his face. We sat on a bench overlooking the swan boats, an activity we had enjoyed together when I was a child. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said, his voice gravelly with emotion. "I've missed you, Patricia." "I've missed you too," I admitted, but I needed time to process everything. He nodded. "I understand more than you might think." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew an envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a bank statement for a newly opened account in my name, showing a balance of $750,000. "I've recovered the full amount," he explained. "Your father has signed legal documents acknowledging the misappropriation and has repaid it from his personal accounts. It's yours now, no strings attached." I stared at the statement, feeling strangely detached from the large sum. "I'm not sure I want it anymore." "Why not?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because it feels like another thing I didn't earn another way. I'm not standing on my own 2 feet." Grandpa Thomas was quiet for a moment. "May I tell you a story?" One I've never shared with you before. I nodded, curious, despite myself. When I was 23, fresh out of architecture school, my father offered to help me start my own firm. He had connections, capital, everything I needed to succeed. I refused. I was too proud, too determined to make it entirely on my own. He gazed out at the water, lost in memory. I struggled for years, taking whatever commissions I could get. Living in a tiny apartment. Not much better than your basement. I was so convinced that accepting help meant I wasn't good enough. What changed? I asked. Your grandmother. He smiled. She helped me see that there's a difference between being given a life and being given the tools to build one. When I finally accepted my father's help at 30, it wasn't admitting defeat. It was recognizing that success doesn't have to be a solitary journey. He turned to face me directly. I'm not asking you to forgive your father right away, or me for that matter. What I did interfering with your scholarship, your internship. I thought I was helping, but I see now. I should have been transparent. I should have trusted you with the truth. Yes, you should have. I agreed. It made me question everything I thought I'd achieved on merit. Your talent is real, Patricia. The opportunities may have been arranged, but what you did with them was all you. No one can give you talent or passion or work ethic. Those are yours alone. I considered his words, finding truth in them. I hadn't been able to see before. I'm starting to build a life I'm proud of. I told him I've connected with other artists, started doing mural work. It feels good knowing I'm earning my place. I'm proud of you, he said simply, and I want you to have this money not as a crutch, but as a tool. Use it. Don't use it. That's your choice. But don't reject it just to prove a point to yourself or anyone else. As we parted that day, I didn't take the bank information, but I didn't refuse it either. I needed more time to decide what role, if any, this inheritance would play in my life. A week later, I was working on sketches for a new mural commission. When the bell above the coffee shop door jingled, I looked up to see Stephanie standing hesitantly at the counter, scanning the room until her eyes found mine. My first instinct was to pack up and leave, but Hannah, working behind the counter, had already noticed her. Your sister, she whispered as she refreshed my coffee. I nodded. Want me to tell her you're busy? I considered it, then shook my head. No, it's time. Stephanie approached my table cautiously, as if expecting me to bolt. She looked different, somehow less polished, more authentic. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual perfect blowout, and she wore jeans instead of her customary tailored slacks. Can I sit? She asked. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. An awkward silence settled between us until Hannah appeared with a fresh coffee for Stephanie. I'll give you two some space, she said, with an encouraging smile at me. How did you find me? I asked once. Hannah had moved away. Ethan, Stephanie admitted. He said you mentioned working on a mural here. It's beautiful, by the way. She gestured to the half-finished design covering the back wall. Thanks. Another silence. Longer this time. I've left the firm, she finally said, the words rushing out. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't do it anymore. Pretending to love a career I chose to please Dad. This was unexpected. What are you doing now? Figuring it out, she said with a small laugh. I've started taking piano lessons again. Remember how I used to play in high school? I did. Remember, Stephanie had been talented, but had abandoned music when our father suggested law would be a more practical use of her intelligence. I'm terrified, she confessed. I'm 31 and starting over. But I'm also more at peace than I've been in years. What does Dad think about all this? Her expression clouded. He's not happy, says I'm throwing away a promising career. But for the first time, I don't care what he thinks. I'm done living my life for his approval. She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. I'm so sorry, Patricia, for everything, for knowing about the apartment, and not telling you, for benefiting from Dad's decision to invest your money in James's clinic, for years of letting Dad pit us against each other. You could have told me, I said, the hurt still raw. Any time in those 6 months, you could have said something. I know, she acknowledged. I told myself it wasn't my place, that Dad would handle it. But the truth is, I was a coward. It was easier to go along with it than stand up to him. And now I'm trying to be brave like you've always been. Her eyes met mine, sincere in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. You never compromised, Patricia. You followed your passion despite all the pressure. I've always been jealous of that. Jealous of me? The concept seemed absurd. You were the golden child. Or the successful one. Successful at what? Making our father proud. Living someone else's definition of success. She shook her head. You were authentic. True to yourself. That takes real courage. As we talked, really talked, for the first time in years, I began to see my sister not as the perfect rival I had always envied, but as someone who had made different choices and was now questioning them just as I was questioning mine. By the time we parted with a tentative hug, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The final confrontation came 3 days later when my father showed up at my basement apartment unannounced. I almost didn't answer the door, but curiosity won out. He stood awkwardly on my tiny concrete porch, looking out of place in his expensive suit. For the first time I could remember, he seemed uncertain. "May I come in?" he asked formally. I stepped aside, watching as he took in my small living space. The water stains the second-hand furniture, the drafty windows. Seeing it through his eyes, I felt a flash of defiance. This was where I had been living while he diverted my apartment fund. "I know you've spoken with your grandfather and Stephanie," he began. "I thought it was time we talked as well about my failure as your father." The blunt admission caught me off guard. I'd expected excuses, justifications, anything but this. "I convinced myself I was protecting you." He continued when I didn't respond that I knew what was best. "I've spent so many years believing that success looks a certain way, follows a certain path, when you chose differently. I couldn't understand it. So you took control of my life without my knowledge. I said you decided I wasn't capable of managing my own inheritance." "Yes." He didn't try to deny it. "I was wrong, deeply, unforgivably wrong. Why are you here, Dad? What do you want from me?" He looked around my apartment again, his gaze landing on my drafting table covered with sketches for the coffee shop. "Mural. I want to see your work," he said simply. "Your real work, not the school projects I dismissed, or the little drawings I never took seriously. I want to understand what you love about it, why you fought so hard to pursue it. It wasn't what I had expected. Why now?" "Because I've lost Stephanie to this need for control. I'm losing Ethan's respect. I've damaged my relationship with my own father, and I've hurt you most of all." He met my eyes directly. "I don't want to lose my entire family, because I was too stubborn to see that there are many paths to a meaningful life." I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but found only weariness and regret. "There's a coffee shop on Cambridge Street," I said finally. "I'm painting a mural there. If you really want to see my work, meet me there tomorrow at 10. The next morning, I arrived early to continue work on the mural. Unsure if my father would actually show up at precisely 10 Nushr, the door opened, and he walked in, dressed more casually than I had seen him in years. Jeans and a button-down shirt, instead of his usual suit. For the next hour, I explained my design process, the symbolism in the mural, the techniques I was using. To my surprise, he asked thoughtful questions, actually listening to my answers, rather than waiting for his turn to speak. As I demonstrated how I was creating depth through layering, something unexpected happened. My father's eyes widened with genuine appreciation. "This is remarkable, Patricia," he said, studying a section I had completed the day before. "The way you've created movement in a static image. I had no idea you were this talented." "You never looked," I said simply. He nodded, accepting the truth of it. "I'm looking now, and I see someone with extraordinary skill and vision, someone who deserves support, not control," as he helped me clean my brushes later that morning. A small gesture, but meaningful in its humility. I realized we had reached a turning point. Not reconciliation. Not yet, but the beginning of a new kind of relationship built on seeing each other clearly, for perhaps the first time. "The money your grandfather recovered," he said as we were finishing up, "it's yours. No strings attached. Use it for your art, for a better apartment, for travel, for anything you choose. I won't offer advice unless you ask for it." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "I'm still figuring out what I want to do with it." "Whatever you decide," he replied. "I want you to know I'm proud of you, not because of what you've accomplished by traditional metrics, but because you've had the courage to live authentically. That's something I'm only now learning to do myself. As he left, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying the burden of seeking approval from someone who had never truly seen me for the first time in my adult life. I felt truly free to chart my own course, not in opposition to my family's expectations, but simply according to my own truth. 6 months after the birthday dinner that had upended my life, I stood in the center of my new studio space, a converted loft in Somerville with high ceilings, abundant natural light, and not a trace of black mold. The walls were covered with works in progress and inspiration boards. A large drafting table dominated one corner, while a comfortable living area occupied another. It wasn't the Beacon Street apartment my grandfather had intended, but it was perfect for me, spacious enough for my work, but modest enough that I could maintain it with my growing income. After much consideration, I had used part of my inheritance to purchase the studio outright, eliminating the burden of rent and giving myself the freedom to be more selective about client projects. The rest remained invested a safety net that provided peace of mind without dictating my choices. My mural business had expanded beyond my expectations. What began with one coffee shop wall had grown into commissions for restaurants, schools, and community centers throughout Boston. I had hired 2 assistants, both fellow artists I'd met through Hannah's connections, and together we were transforming blank walls into stories told through color and form. Hannah had become not just a neighbor, but a true friend. Our relationship deepening through shared creative pursuits and late-night conversations about art, family, and finding one's authentic path. She had recently been promoted to head baker at her cafe and often used my studio for recipe testing on weekends, filling the space with the scent of experimental pastries. My relationship with my family had evolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. Ethan visited my studio every Saturday, where I was teaching him the fundamentals of drawing. At 16, he showed remarkable talent, though whether he would pursue art seriously remained to be seen. What mattered was that he was exploring his interests freely, without pressure to conform to anyone else's expectations. Stephanie had followed through on her dramatic career change, leaving law behind to teach music at a community arts center. She was earning a fraction of her former salary, but spoke about her work with a passion I had never heard in her voice before. We met for coffee regularly, slowly rebuilding our relationship as sisters rather than rivals. My father and I had established a new dynamic based on mutual respect rather than control. He had struggled initially with the urge to offer unsolicited advice, but was learning to listen more than he spoke. When I invited him to the opening of a group show featuring one of my murals, he had stood quietly observing, then simply said, "I understand now why you love this. Thank you for sharing it with me." Grandpa Thomas, now 83, had become a regular visitor to my studio. Sometimes he brought his own sketches, and we would draw together in companionable silence. He had apologized more than once for his well-intentioned but misguided attempts to manage my career from behind the scenes. "I should have trusted you enough to offer help openly," he told me. "Instead of arranging opportunities in secret, I understand why you did it." I replied, "You were trying to level the playing field that Dad had tilted against me. Still, you deserve the dignity of choice of knowing the truth." The wounds my family had inflicted were healing, though the scars remained. I had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. It meant acknowledging the pain while choosing not to be defined by it. On a crisp fall evening, I hosted a small dinner party in my studio to celebrate the completion of my largest commission to date, a 3-story mural for a children's hospital. Hannah had baked an elaborate cake decorated with edible paint splatters, and the studio was filled with the warm glow of string lights and candles. Looking around the table at the gathering, my family interspersed with my new friends from the art community, I marveled at how much had changed in half a year. The tension that had once characterized family gatherings had been replaced by something more authentic. We were learning to see each other as we truly were, not as we wished each other to be. My father, more relaxed than I had seen him in years, was engaged in earnest conversation with one of my artist friends about the business side of creative pursuits. Stephanie was showing Ethan a piano app on her phone, their heads bent together in shared interest. Grandpa Thomas was entertaining Hannah with stories of architectural disasters from his early career. As I refilled wine glasses and passed plates of food, I caught my reflection in the studio windows and paused, struck by the person I saw there. Not the struggling artist desperate for validation, nor the angry daughter consumed by betrayal, but someone stronger, clearer, more centered in her own truth. The journey from that disastrous birthday dinner to this moment had been painful but necessary. I had learned lessons that would shape the rest of my life. That true value isn't measured in bank accounts or prestigious addresses. That sometimes the people who love us most can hurt us deeply through misguided attempts to help. That establishing clear boundaries isn't selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. And perhaps most importantly, that success isn't about meeting others' expectations, but about living in alignment with your own values and truth. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, my father lingered, helping me clear dishes despite my protest that he should leave it for tomorrow. "I'm proud of you, Patricia," he said quietly as we worked side by side at the sink. "Not because of your success, though. That's remarkable. But I'm proud of how you handled everything this past year, with more grace and wisdom than I managed in twice as many decades." "I had good teachers," I replied even when the lessons were painful. He nodded, understanding the complexity in my words. "Your grandfather told me something recently that I can't stop thinking about. He said that true love isn't about shaping someone into what you think they should be. It's about giving them the space to become who they already are. He's a wise man, wiser than his son." "Certainly." My father smiled ruefully. "I'm still learning." "We all are," I assured him after everyone had gone and I was alone in my studio. I stood by the windows overlooking the city lights. The inheritance that had caused so much turmoil had ultimately led to transformation for our entire family. My sister had found the courage to pursue her passion. My father was learning to love without controlling. My grandfather was making peace with his well-intentioned mistakes. And I had discovered a strength in myself I hadn't known existed. Sometimes the deepest wounds open, doors we never knew were there. The apartment I was supposed to receive might have been just a place to live, but instead I had built something far more valuable, a life of authenticity work that mattered, and relationship based on truth rather than expectation. As I turned away from the window, my gaze fell on the first commission check I had framed and hung on the wall. A modest sum for the coffee shop mural that had marked the beginning of this new chapter. Beside it hung the bracelet Ethan had made for my birthday, now mounted in a simple shadow box. Tangible reminders of where I'd been and how far I'd come. The journey wasn't over, of course. There would be more challenges, more growth, more lessons to learn. But for the first time in my life, I was facing the future. Not with fear of disappointment or desperate need for approval, but with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth, separate from anyone else's assessment of it. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship after a deep betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to start living authentically. Thank you for being part of this community where we can share our stories and heal together. Remember, sometimes the hardest challenges lead to the most beautiful transformation.